welcome to the show. We are incredibly thrilled you're joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me back.
Of course. And, before we get into anything else, if you enjoy the deep dives we do here, please take a quick second to like and subscribe.
It really is the absolute best way to support the show.
It totally is. It helps us keep the algorithms guessing, and, well, it ensures we can keep bringing these totally unfiltered conversations directly to you.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's just jump right in. Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of absolute precision.
Right, like engineering or math.
Yeah, exactly. You break your arm, you go to the hospital, the x-ray shows that jagged white line on the screen, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is. Broken.
It's binary, objective.
Right. Broken or not broken. It's a clean narrative. And honestly, it's comforting. We like things to be visible, to be perfectly categorized like that.
We crave that certainty.
We do. But then you step into the world of socioeconomics or cultural shifts and the modern labor market. And suddenly that x-ray machine is just completely shattered.
Oh, yeah.
We're looking at a modern ideological landscape that is, frankly, murky. It's layered, and it's incredibly difficult to diagnose.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean, when you look at the state of the modern working class, especially working class men, the raw data is just undeniable.
Right. The numbers speak for themselves.
Exactly. The economic distress is right there on paper, but the causes, the why, that is where the battle lines are drawn, and the narratives just diverge wildly.
And today, we're diving into a source that doesn't just, draw battle lines. It essentially calls in a precision airstrike on the entire modern economic and cultural consensus.
That is a very good way to put it.
We are looking at a brand new, incredibly provocative ebook titled Macroaggressions: How Big Tech Billionaires Profit from Male Misery. It's written by Conrad Riker and published in 2026.
It's definitely causing some waves.
Huge waves. And if you find this analysis compelling as we go through it, and I suspect many of you will, you can buy the ebook right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
Highly recommend checking it out for yourselves.
Yeah, and you should also absolutely follow the author for his latest writing. He's at Conrad Riker on Substack.
Because this book is a radical, entirely unvarnished look at how modern economics, specifically the tech monopolies and progressive ideology, have basically converged over the last few decades.
And we should frame exactly who this is written for. I mean, for those of you in our audience who are deeply interested in men's rights, who follow the conversations in the manosphere, and who consider yourselves red-pilled.
Right, the guys who are really digging into this stuff.
Exactly. If you've been trying to understand the history of our societal institutions before they were captured by feminist and Marxist frameworks, this book is designed as a manifesto directly for you.
It claims to expose the literal architectural blueprints of that institutional capture.
But we need to be incredibly clear right up front about the mission of today's deep dive.
Very clear.
Our goal is to unpack Riker's highly complex theories step by step. We're going to look at how he believes the working man has been systematically marginalized by a deliberate, calculated coalition between tech oligarchs and radical left-wing ideologues.
Which brings us to a very important mandatory disclaimer for you listening.
Yes, please.
This source material contains highly charged political, social, and cultural viewpoints.
Definitely.
We are impartially reporting on the content provided in this book. We are not endorsing these left-wing or right-wing viewpoints.
Right. We aren't taking a side here.
Our job here is strictly analytical. We are breaking down Riker's arguments, analyzing his historical connections, and just helping you understand the underlying logic of his explosive thesis.
Yeah, because Riker pulls absolutely zero punches in this text, so neither will we in our analysis of his work.
He frames this entire socioeconomic dynamic as an active, ongoing war.
And his foundational premise requires us to radically reevaluate the economy that we interact with every single day on our smartphones. Let's start right there with his core economic premise.
The gig economy.
Right. For the last decade, maybe a little longer, we've all been sold this massive PR narrative about the gig economy. You know the pitch.
Oh, it's everywhere.
It's plastered on bus stops, targeted ads on social media. Be your own boss. Set your own hours. It's sold as the ultimate expression of freedom and micro-entrepreneurship.
Well, Riker calls that narrative a complete and utter scam.
Those are his actual words.
Yes, scam. He argues that big tech oligarchs have essentially taken the concept of feudal serfdom, digitized it, rebranded it with slick UX design, and sold it back to the working class as freedom.
Wow.
His central premise is that the gig economy is actually a digital plantation, and it is explicitly designed to reduce men to rightless, atomized drones.
Okay, that is a massive claim to make.
Yeah.
But he brings hard data to back it up,
No.
right? He's not just like theorizing in a vacuum.
No, he brings a lot of data. He starts with a major report from the Economic Policy Institute.
Okay, what does the EPI say?
So, when you look at the glossy marketing for gig work, they often advertise competitive hourly rates, like make 25 bucks an hour driving.
Right, always looks great on the billboard.
But the EPI report strips away the marketing and factors in all the hidden expenses. Self-employment taxes, vehicle depreciation, lack of health insurance, lack of paid time off, gas, basic maintenance.
The stuff the app doesn't pay for.
Exactly. When you account for the actual total cost of labor, the EPI found that gig workers earn approximately 58% less than equivalent W-2 employees.
Wait, 58% less?
Yeah.
So you're doing the exact same amount of physical labor, maybe driving a car or delivering heavy packages all day, but taking home less than half of what a traditional employee would make.
That's the math. And what's fascinating is how he layers that broad macroeconomic data with highly specific granular studies. Like he points to a Princeton University study that focused specifically on Amazon Flex drivers.
The independent contractors delivering packages out of their personal vehicle.
Right. The guys you see pulling up in their own Honda Civics.
What did the Princeton study find about them?
It found that a staggering 85% of those Amazon Flex drivers earned less than the legally mandated minimum wage in their respective states once all operational costs were actually deducted.
85% are making sub-minimum wage. That is just wild.
It is. And Riker's critical point here is that this massive wage depression isn't a glitch in the app's algorithm.
It's not an accident.
No, it isn't a mistake that the tech companies are actively trying to fix. He argues it is the intended feature. In this digital plantation, you own absolutely nothing.
You're just renting access to the platform.
Exactly. You don't own your clientele. You don't own the data of the routes you drive. You don't control your wages. Those are set dynamically by an algorithm that you literally can't negotiate with.
And your livelihood can just vanish in a second.
Yes, you can be terminated, what the tech companies bloodlessly call being deactivated, at the push of a button. And it's often done by an automated system. No human recourse, no severance, no union representation.
So it's like a 19th century mining company town, but somehow worse. Let me stretch this analogy because I think it really helps visualize what he's saying.
Go for it.
100 years ago, in a coal town in Appalachia, the mining boss owned the house you rented, he owned the company store where you bought your food, and he owned the mine where you worked.
Total monopoly on your life.
Right. If you stepped out of line, you lost your income and your home. But at least in that physical company town, you were surrounded by other miners.
We're at peers.
You could organize, you could look the boss in the eye, you had a physical community. Riker is saying this new version is entirely digital. It's algorithmic serfdom.
That's exactly his point.
You are totally isolated in your own car, competing against invisible drivers, answering to an algorithm that doesn't even know your name.
That analogy is flawless when understanding his framework, and it leads directly into his critique of our legal system. Specifically, why the government just sits back and allows this to happen.
Right, where are the regulators?
Well, Riker spends a huge portion of his analysis tearing apart modern antitrust laws. He argues that our legal tools are stuck in that 19th century company town era.
He talks a lot about the Sherman Antitrust Act. Break down why he thinks it's obsolete.
So the Sherman Antitrust Act was passed in 1890. Its purpose was to bust up physical monopolies. Think Standard Oil, U.S. Steel, the railroad tycoons.
The classic robber barons.
Right. And how did Standard Oil hurt people? They cornered the market on physical kerosene and then they jacked up the price. So the legal framework of the Sherman Act became obsessed with something called consumer welfare.
Meaning, as long as the prices stay low for the consumer, the government generally thinks a monopoly isn't doing any actual harm.
Precisely. Fast forward to today. Riker uses the economic theories of Carl Shapiro and Hal Varian, who wrote extensively about network effects in the information age.
Yep.
Tech monopolies don't operate like Standard Oil. Amazon doesn't usually jack up prices to price gouge consumers. In fact, they often operate at a massive loss just to offer free 2-day shipping.
Right. Google offers free searches. Facebook is free to use.
So because the goods are cheap or free, the Department of Justice looks at them and says, well, the consumer welfare standard is met, prices are low, no harm, no foul.
They just completely miss the impact on the workers.
Exactly. Underneath that illusion of consumer paradise, Riker points to catastrophic economic destruction on the producer side. He cites data from the Institute for Local Self-Reliance,
What they track?
Retail Friends. Their data shows that Amazon effectively annihilated 65,000 small retail businesses between 2005 and 2015 alone.
Wait, 65,000 independent businesses wiped out in a single decade.
Yes. And Riker frames this not just as a tragedy of capitalism, but as the targeted destruction of independent male livelihoods.
Unpack that connection for me.
Yeah.
Why does he gender the destruction of small business? Why is it a specifically male issue?
Well, historically, who owned the local hardware store? Who ran the auto parts shop, the independent sporting goods store, the local lumber yard?
I see.
These were predominantly male-owned enterprises. Riker argues these weren't just stores. They were bastions of male community leadership.
Right, the guy who owned the hardware store sponsored the Little League team.
Exactly. He sponsored the team. He provided summer jobs for local teenagers. He had economic sovereignty, which gave him social and political influence in his community.
He was a pillar.
Right. And Riker is arguing that the current academic and legal obsession with consumer welfare is a fundamental betrayal of that American worker.
The law just completely ignores the total destruction of a community's economic backbone.
Yes, the destruction of the patriarchal provider role. And all because society has decided that getting cheap plastic electronics delivered to our doorsteps in 48 hours is somehow more important than male economic independence.
Okay, this brings up a massive question I had while reading his analysis.
Let's hear it.
If this is all just ruthless corporate greed, a massive, calculated upward redistribution of wealth from Main Street to a few Silicon Valley billionaires, why does Riker argue that big tech relies so heavily on progressive, left-wing politics?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Right. If these guys are just modern robber barons trying to crush the competition and maximize quarterly profits, why the woke branding?
That seems contradictory.
It does. Why all the rainbow flags, the diversity statements, the pronouns in the corporate bios? Standard Oil didn't pretend to care about social justice. They just wanted your money. Why does modern tech care?
This is where Riker's theory shifts from purely economic to deeply cultural. He introduces a concept he calls the woke smokescreen.
The woke smokescreen. Okay.
Riker posits that Marxism, queer theory, modern gender studies, all of it, is not a grassroots rebellion against the elites like they claim. He argues it is actually a top-down weapon of mass distraction deployed by the elites themselves.
So he's saying that corporations are actively funding the very ideologies that claim to hate capitalism.
Yeah.
How does that even work?
He calls it the subsidy of the corporate state. According to Riker, modern corporate progressivism, and specifically feminism, was the ultimate capitalist Trojan horse.
Let me stop you there and push back on this because I really want to make sure I understand his logic here.
Sure.
Giving women the right to work, access to corporate jobs, independent bank accounts, most people just view that as fundamental moral equality. Why is Riker framing basic feminism as a capitalist plot to hurt men?
Well, Riker isn't necessarily arguing against the moral philosophy of equality in a vacuum. He is laser focused on the macroeconomic math.
Okay, follow the money.
Right. Look at it from the perspective of a corporate oligarch in the mid-20th century. Your biggest expense is labor. You have a workforce of men who are largely unionized.
They have power.
Yes. They demand what was historically called a family wage. That's a salary robust enough for one man to support a wife, children, and pay a mortgage. And because the labor pool is relatively restricted, the workers have immense bargaining power.
Basic supply and demand. If labor is scarce, labor is expensive.
Exactly. So if you're the oligarch, how do you break the leverage of the unions? How do you eliminate the massive burden of paying a family wage? You have to increase the supply of labor.
I see where this is going.
Riker argues that by adopting and funding feminist rhetoric, by culturally convincing women that traditional domestic roles were inherently oppressive, and that true liberation could only be found in corporate cubicles, the elites brilliantly managed to double the size of the labor supply practically overnight.
Oh, wow. And basic economics dictates that if you artificially flood the labor market with twice as many workers, while the number of jobs remains relatively stable, the value of that labor just plummets.
You have the wages.
Yeah. So he is saying the modern gender wage gap debate is just a rhetorical weapon used by HR departments to distract the working class from a much darker reality.
Which is what?
That bringing women into the corporate workforce.
That is the core of the woke smokescreen. The corporations destroyed your earning power, but they distract you by making you argue with your peers about gender theory.
So in his view, It delivered a fatal blow to both the family unit and male authority simultaneously.
Yes, it stripped men of their historical biological status as the sole provider and protector, and pushed them into a desperate, wage-stagnant environment where they eventually end up driving for gig apps just to make rent.
And Riker actually traces the intellectual roots of this strategy back through history, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't believe it happened by accident.
Not at all. He points directly to the Frankfurt School in the 1930s, and specifically to a philosopher named Herbert Marcuse.
Okay, what is the Frankfurt School for those who aren't steeped in 20th century academic history?
The Frankfurt School was a group of Marxist intellectuals in Germany who later fled to the United States. They developed what is known today as critical theory.
Which we hear a lot about now.
Right. Their foundational belief was that traditional Marxist economics, like a simple workers' revolution, had failed because the Western working class was too comfortable. So they shifted the focus from economic class warfare to cultural warfare.
And where does Marcuse fit into that?
Well, in 1937, Marquise began laying the groundwork for theories he would later popularize in the 60s, specifically his concept of repressive tolerance.
Repressive tolerance. That sounds like a total oxymoron. What does that actually mean in practice?
It means exactly what it sounds like. Marquise argued that true tolerance requires suppressing right-wing, conservative, or traditional ideas while actively amplifying left-wing, radical ideas.
Wait, so being tolerant requires censorship?
Yes, he believed that allowing conservative ideas to be debated freely was inherently oppressive. And Riker argues that this exact philosophy was adopted by modern tech companies to justify algorithmic censorship today.
That is wild.
Furthermore, Riker says these theories were deliberately engineered to shatter the patriarchal family.
Why target the family, though? Why do Marxists or corporate elites care who is eating dinner together?
Because the traditional family unit, anchored by an independent, financially sovereign male provider, was viewed as the only social institution strong enough to resist total state and corporate control.
I mean, a man who can feed his own family without government assistance or gig economy dependency is a man who can say no.
Exactly. Riker argues the elites had to destroy the family to create a totally dependent consumer base. You can't control someone who doesn't need you.
He also goes aggressively after modern academia in this section, right?
Oh, he absolutely does. He points to Judith Butler, who is widely considered the foundational theorist of modern gender studies.
What's her angle?
Well, Butler built an incredibly lucrative academic career arguing that biological sex isn't real, that it's entirely a social construct performed through language and behavior.
How does Riker respond to that?
He dismisses it as pure anti-science propaganda. He states that her positions are overwhelmingly rejected by credible evolutionary biologists and geneticists.
Just totally ignores biology.
Right, but his larger point is about the pipeline. He claims this toxic ideology doesn't just stay in the gender studies departments. It is pumped directly from the Ivy League into the corporate human resources departments of Fortune 500 companies.
And this brings us to the staggering hypocrisy he highlights regarding these corporations, the virtue signaling versus the reality. He brings up Amazon again here.
He does. He cites IRS tax data showing that in 2018, Amazon, a multi-trillion-dollar entity, paid exactly $0 in federal income taxes.
Zero.
Zero. Yet, if you look at their public relations budget for that exact same year, they spent millions sponsoring pride parades, funding diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and promoting progressive social causes.
Riker calls this the economics of envy, right?
Yes. He argues that these tech oligarchs relentlessly preach a borderless, defunded, radically egalitarian society for the working class.
They want the working class to have no borders, no police, and no patriarchal authority.
But the billionaires practice the exact opposite in their own lives.
Right, he points out Mark Zuckerberg.
He notes that while Zuckerberg's platforms promote globalism and open borders, Zuckerberg himself dropped over $100 million to buy up enormous tracts of adjacent property around his Hawaiian estate.
Just to build massive physical walls and ensure total isolation.
Exactly.
So the elites demand absolute patriarchal power, physical territory, and private armed security for themselves. But they enforce emotional vulnerability, defunded neighborhoods, and algorithmic serfdom on the average working class man.
That is the devastating conclusion of his economic thesis. The tech oligarchs are the new feudal lords, and the progressive woke HR departments are simply their modern-day overseers, deploying gender theory to ensure the workforce remains divided, guilt-ridden, entirely atomized, and perfectly compliant.
Okay, so that's the macro view, the societal architecture. But what does this all mean for the individual guy?
The guy on the ground.
Yeah, the man waking up trying to navigate his workplace, trying to date, trying to exist in this system. Riker moves from economics into the deep psychological toll this takes, introducing a concept he calls the misandrist double bind.
This is arguably one of the most vital concepts in the entire book.
Walk us through it.
To understand it, we first need to define what a double bind is in psychology. A double bind is a communicative dilemma where a person receives two or more conflicting messages, and no matter how they respond, they are punished.
It's a rigged game.
There is no winning move, and Riker argues that society, driven by this corporate feminist smokescreen, has created a massive, inescapable double bind around the concept of toxic masculinity.
Walk me through the mechanics of this trap. How does a man experience this day to day?
The trap is set by corporate culture, the media, and modern HR departments. They loudly and relentlessly demand that men need to change.
We hear that everywhere.
Men need to be soft. Men need to be vulnerable. They are told they must get in touch with their feelings, cry more, and completely abandon their natural biological instincts for aggression, competition, and stoicism.
Right. The future is female, smash the patriarchy. Men need to open up.
And this is the absolute crux of the trap. When men actually listen, when they finally comply with that societal demand and show genuine emotional vulnerability, they are met with visceral, profound contempt from the very people who demanded they open up.
And he brings the receipts on this. He doesn't just claim women and society hate vulnerable men. He points to actual psychological studies.
Yes. He cites a highly revealing 2016 study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology.
So peer-reviewed science.
This wasn't a fringe survey, it was rigorous. The researchers wanted to see how society reacted to male vulnerability, and they found that both men and women unconsciously associate weakness and emotional display in men with a severe social penalty.
What were the exact findings?
Men who exhibited vulnerability or sadness in the workplace were perceived by both male and female colleagues as significantly less competent, less capable of leadership, and ultimately less worthy of respect than men who maintained stoicism. Their status plummeted the absolute moment they showed the emotions society told them to show.
Riker also pulls in evolutionary psychology to explain why this happens, right?
Yeah.
He mentions David Buss at the University of Texas.
David Buss is one of the pioneers of evolutionary psychology. His extensive cross-cultural research demonstrates that despite what modern gender studies professors claim, human biological drives have not changed.
We are still wired the same way.
Across all cultures, on every continent, women consistently rank physical strength, social status, assertiveness, and the ability to provision and protect as the most universally attractive male traits.
So we have a situation where female biology universally respects and desires a strong, capable man. Yet modern progressive society actively demonizes that exact male strength as toxic.
It's madness.
If you act strong and assertive, HR fires you for being toxic. If you act vulnerable and soft, society and women view you as pathetic and incompetent. You literally lose either way.
It is a psychological torture chamber, and Riker insists this is not a cultural accident. It is a brilliant control mechanism.
How does he phrase it?
He writes, and I quote, "A man who cannot win is a man who cannot fight back. A man who cannot fight back is a man who can be exploited indefinitely."
I want to circle back to something there. Is this why Riker refers to emotional vulnerability as a deliberate incapacitation of the working class?
Absolutely. He looks back at the history of pop psychology, specifically in the 1970s. Think about things like Arthur Yanoff's primal scream therapy or the explosion of the self-esteem movement.
Right, the era of sharing your feelings.
These movements convinced an entire generation of men that whining was a form of healing, that complaining was a virtue. Riker argues that true classical stoicism, the emotional mastery of your own mind, is the only way to effectively resist technocratic control.
Because a weeping, heavily medicated, hypersensitive man who is obsessed with his own micro-traumas is not going to organize a labor strike.
Exactly. He's not going to build a parallel economy. He is utterly incapacitated.
The real-world fallout from this psychological warfare is incredibly dark. He points to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention regarding suicide.
The statistics are horrifying. The CDC data shows that men account for nearly 80% of all suicide deaths in the United States.
80%?
Yes. And Riker lays the blame for this massive epidemic of male despair directly at the feet of this ideological framework.
It's hard to argue with those numbers.
He claims the modern medical and psychological establishments have pathologized the exact biological traits aggression, risk-taking, stoicism, competitiveness that were required to build civilization in the first place.
When you tell a man his very nature is a disease, you destroy his will to live.
It's a very bleak, very heavy assessment, but it is crucial to understanding Riker's worldview. He literally views the modern cultural landscape as an active, hostile war zone against male biology.
Which brings us to the next massive question. How did this ideology become so systemic? How did it get into the water supply of every major institution?
In section 4 of the book, Riker breaks down the architecture of what he calls institutional capture, starting with how young minds are molded. He refers to the modern university system as academic re-education camps.
He doesn't believe college is about learning anymore, does he?
Not even remotely. He argues that the university system abandoned classical intellectual debate decades ago. In his view, the modern campus operates as an enemy occupation force.
An occupation force.
Yes, its primary function is twofold: to demographically replace men in the professional class, and to intellectually geld the men who actually managed to get in.
What's the demographic data he uses to support that?
He pulls numbers directly from the National Student Clearinghouse Research Center. Their data shows that the current college enrollment ratio is a massive 60-40 female-to-male split.
Now,
For every 40 men on a college campus, there are 60 women, and the gap is widening every single year.
most mainstream commentators would say, well, girls are just maturing faster, they're studying harder, they're organically outperforming boys. Riker obviously doesn't see it as organic.
Not at all. He views that 60-40 split as the intended result of a perfectly calibrated, decades-long misandrist filter designed to specifically push boys out of the education system.
And a key piece of legal evidence he points to is the weaponization of Title IX.
Right.
Okay, let's break down Title IX because I think a lot of people misunderstand what it actually is. Passed in 1972, originally, wasn't Title IX just a simple law about guaranteeing equal funding for women's athletics, making sure the girls' basketball team had a gym just like the boys?
Originally, yes. The text of the law is very brief. It just bans sex-based discrimination in federally funded education. But Riker argues that over the last 40 years, radical feminist ideologues and university administrations essentially hijacked the legislation.
They changed its entire purpose.
They morphed it from a law about funding sports into a blunt instrument to eradicate male spaces and penalize normal male behavior under the guise of equity.
How exactly did they weaponize it?
Riker points specifically to a massive legal shift that occurred during the Obama administration in 2011. The Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights issued a document known as the Dear Colleague Letter.
This is the letter that drastically changed how campus tribunals handle accusations.
Correct. Before 2011, if a student was accused of a serious violation, like sexual assault, universities generally required clear and convincing evidence to punish them. They respected basic due process.
As they should.
But the Dear Colleague Letter mandated that universities must lower the burden of proof to a preponderance of the evidence standard.
Explain the mechanics of that for the listener. What does preponderance of evidence actually mean in a hearing?
It means 50.1%. It means more likely than not. In a real criminal court, you have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, maybe 95 or 99% certainty, because stripping someone of their freedom is a severe action. Riker argues that by forcing campuses to use a 51% standard, the federal government explicitly stripped young men of their constitutional due process rights.
It turned universities into hostile, paranoid environments where a mere accusation, even with zero physical evidence, is mathematically enough to completely destroy a young man's academic and professional career.
Exactly. So you have young men walking on eggshells, knowing their entire future can be erased by a tribunal that only has to be 51% sure they did something wrong.
That's terrifying. And Riker extends this critique of the legal system far beyond the college campus. He moves into how the law treats adult men, specifically focusing on family law in a chapter he titles The Misandrist Legal Matrix.
This is where he gets into divorce and family courts.
Right. His major premise here is that all of society relies entirely on male physical sacrifice, male tax dollars, and male provision to actually function. Men build the roads, maintain the power grid, and pay the majority of the taxes.
But the state simultaneously empowers women to unilaterally dissolve the family unit without consequence via no-fault divorce statutes.
So a woman can dissolve a contract for any reason or no reason at all, while the man is financially enslaved to the consequences through alimony and child support.
That is his exact argument. He states that the family court system is essentially an extortion racket backed by the threat of state violence, meaning prison, if a man falls behind on payments.
And he traces the intellectual roots of this systemic bias back to 1981, right?
Yeah.
With the creation of something called the Duluth model in Minnesota.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I want to spend some time on this. The Duluth model. This is huge in domestic violence intervention. I think it's the standard across most of the Western world. How does it work?
It is the absolute gold standard for police departments and social workers. But Riker asks us to look at how it was actually created. He points out that it wasn't created by unbiased scientists looking at domestic violence data.
Who created it?
It was cooked up by radical feminist activists who established a framework called the power and control wheel.
How does that wheel dictate what a cop does on a Friday night during a domestic disturbance call?
According to Riker, the Duluth model operates on an automatic gendered presumption. It dictates that domestic violence is inherently rooted in patriarchal control.
Oh, wow.
Therefore, when police arrive at a scene, the model trains them to presume that the man is the primary aggressor and the woman is a helpless victim acting in self-defense.
Regardless of what actually happened.
Riker argues this deliberately ignores vast amounts of data showing reciprocal violence or even female-perpetrated violence. It forces law enforcement to maintain a Marxist victim-oppressor narrative, even if the man is the one bleeding.
And he claims this local model in Minnesota eventually went federal, right?
Yes. He traces it directly to the 1994 Violence Against Women Act, which was famously spearheaded by then-Senator Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Riker views the VLOA as the ultimate federal codification and enforcement of this anti-male legal framework. It funnels billions of dollars into organizations that utilize the Duluth model to train judges and police.
The brutal irony of all this, which Riker points out beautifully with the tax data, is how it's funded.
The funding is the kicker.
He looks at IRS and tax foundation data, which consistently shows that the top 20% of earners pay the vast, vast majority of all federal income taxes. And that demographic of high earners is overwhelmingly male.
What is his conclusion from that math?
His conclusion is that men are literally waking up in the dark, going to work, being taxed at the highest possible rates, and those tax dollars are then funneled directly by the government to subsidize the very university gender studies departments and the very family court legal architectures that are explicitly designed to demonize them, bankrupt them, and strip them of their children.
They are paying for the bullets being fired at them.
It's insane.
He calls it a purely parasitic dynamic. The host is being bled dry by the ideological parasite. And because of this relentless institutional hostility, Riker believes men are retreating. They're becoming entirely atomized, cut off from society, and isolated from one another.
Which perfectly bridges us to Section 5, the atomized male and the destruction of physical spaces. Riker argues that the fact that modern men have nowhere to go to just be around other men isn't an accident.
No, not at all.
Destroying male-only physical spaces wasn't just a natural byproduct of modern egalitarianism. It was a highly calculated strategic objective.
He coins a term for this strategy. He calls it the institutional infiltration theory. He outlines a highly predictable, four-step progressive playbook that activists use to destroy male spaces.
Walk us through the 4 steps.
Step 1. The left identifies a successful male-only space or organization.
Okay.
Step 2. They launch a media campaign labeling that specific space as inherently exclusionary, toxic, and bigoted simply because it excludes women.
Right.
Step 3. They force integration using unrelenting corporate pressure, boycotts, and bogus legal threats, often weaponizing Title VII public accommodation laws to claim the space is discriminating.
Okay, so they force the doors open. What is step 4?
Step 4 is the fatal blow. Once the newly integrated space is opened, it is immediately policed by woke minders and HR types.
So fun police arrive.
The original culture of brotherhood, the rough and tumble dialogue, the unfiltered male bonding, it is all sterilized. The culture is destroyed, and the original male founders and members naturally alienate themselves and leave. The space dies.
He gives some incredibly vivid, real-world example of this playbook in action. The Boy Scouts of America is probably the most massive, tragic example he cites.
It is the textbook example. The Boy Scouts was an organization explicitly designed over a century ago to test young boys' physical limits, to take them into the wilderness, and to build masculine characters safely away from the protective influence of mothers.
Right, let boys be boys.
Riker points out how progressive activists relentlessly targeted the Scouts for decades, suing them, pulling corporate sponsorships, and attacking their leadership.
Until they finally broke them.
Yes. In 2018, the pressure became insurmountable. The organization capitulated, changed its name to Scouts BSA to admit girls, and fundamentally altered its culture.
And what was the result?
Riker notes that just 2 years later, in 2020, suffering from massive membership hemorrhage and lawsuits, the national organization filed for bankruptcy. They destroyed a century-old institution of male development in the name of inclusivity.
He also talks about something much more everyday, the traditional American barbershop.
Right. Historically, the barbershop was a sanctuary. It was a place of unfiltered male dialogue, off-color jokes, and mentorship, safely away from the policing of female sensibilities.
A place to just talk.
Now, Riker argues that cultural space has been colonized. It's been replaced by hyper-feminized corporate hipster salons where men have to sit quietly, discuss HR-approved topics, and pay exorbitant prices for a haircut while being treated like an annoyance.
What's truly fascinating here is how he connects this seemingly localized loss of spatial brotherhood like a barbershop here, a scout troop there, to macro-level catastrophic psychological trends. He brings in Robert Putnam.
Yes, he cites sociologist Robert Putnam's famous book, Bowling Alone. That book tracked the collapse of American civic life.
Right. People not joining leagues anymore.
Riker takes Putnam's data and draws a direct causal correlation between the intentional collapse of physical American male spaces, like the Freemasons, the Elks Lodges, the fraternal orders, the union halls, and the astronomical rise in male depression and suicide we discussed earlier.
Because it forces a vital question. When men lose their physical tribes, when the union hall is gone and the fraternal lodge is bankrupt, where do they go?
Exactly.
If you can't go to the local hardware store because Amazon bankrupted it, and you can't go to the barbershop because it's a corporate salon, where does the average guy end up on a Tuesday night?
You end up alone in your apartment, ordering DoorDash, and staring at a glowing screen.
Which leads us directly into the jaws of Big Tech's final trap, Section 6, the simp economy and digital exploitation.
This section of the book hits you with a statistic from the Pew Research Center that is so staggering it almost feels like a typo.
That is not.
But it is real. The Pew data shows that 63% of men under the age of 30 are currently single and sexually inactive.
Let's just pause on that. 63%. That is nearly 2/3 of young men in their biological prime. How is that even statistically possible in a society where the gender ratio is roughly 50-50? Where are all the women?
Riker addresses that. He points to the hypergamous nature of modern digital dating. Platforms like Tinder, where the top 10% of men monopolize the attention of 90% of the women.
The algorithm favors the top tier.
But his larger point is that Riker tells the reader to let the reality of that 63% number burn into their brain. He says it is not a dating glitch, it is not an accident.
It's intentional.
It is a systematic, engineered purge of the average male from the genetic marketplace. And out of this despair, he introduces his most explosive concept: digital cuckoldry.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of digital cuckoldry.
The theory works like this. Once these millions of average men are successfully atomized, isolated in their apartments, stripped of their physical brotherhoods, and priced out of the marriage market by stagnant wages, they are highly vulnerable.
Sitting ducks.
Big tech then herds these lonely, desperate men into digital brothels.
Yeah, you're talking about platforms like OnlyFans, Twitch, Tinder, Instagram.
Exactly. But it's not just passive entertainment. Riker explains the intense, predatory psychological weaponization going on behind the screens.
It's targeted.
These platforms deliberately feed men emasculating softcore media and explicitly extort them for the baseline human interaction they've been denied in the real world.
He goes deep into the behavioral psychology here, because a lot of people will just say, well, these guys are choosing to log on. They're choosing to tip a girl on Twitch. Just turn off the computer.
Right. Blame the victim.
But Riker argues they are fighting against billion-dollar algorithms using B.F. Skinner's research.
Right. We have to unpack B.F. Skinner. Skinner was a foundational behavioral psychologist. He famously put rats and pigeons into boxes with levers.
The Skinner box.
If the rat pressed the lever and got a food pellet every single time, it eventually got bored and only pressed it when it was actually hungry. If it pressed the lever and never got food, it gave up entirely.
But if you randomize it...
Yes, Skinner discovered variable ratio reinforcement. If the rat presses the lever and the reward comes randomly, maybe on the first press, maybe on the 50th press, the uncertainty creates massive dopamine spikes.
The brain goes crazy.
The rat becomes addicted and will press the lever until it literally dies of exhaustion. Riker points out that this is the exact same psychological mechanic used in casino slot machines.
And it's the exact same mechanic built into the UI of OnlyFans and Twitch.
Precisely. The platforms ensure that lonely men keep clicking, swiping, tipping $10, tipping $50, all for the slight, randomized chance of a parasocial acknowledgement from a creator who views them as nothing more than a walking ATM.
Wow.
Riker says the platform creates a highly addictive illusion of intimacy that systemically drains working class men's bank accounts and funnels it upward to the tech companies.
The predatory mechanics he describes are genuinely terrifying when you realize the scale of data they have.
Yeah.
He sets up this hypothetical scenario in the book. It's 2:13 a.m. You're a single guy, alone in your apartment. The algorithm knows this.
It absolutely knows this because the algorithm tracks your scrolling habits. It tracks the micro hesitations of how long you hover over an image. It tracks your active hours, and it tracks your exact GPS location data.
They know exactly where you are and what you're doing.
They know you are home alone. They deploy highly sophisticated behavioral data to target these men precisely when their psychological and emotional defenses are at their absolute lowest, the middle of the night.
That's when they serve up the targeted push notification or the softcore advertisement.
Exactly. They weaponize male loneliness into a multi-billion-dollar revenue stream. They mine male despair like it's a natural resource.
And he points out the jaw-dropping hypocrisy of these platforms regarding what they choose to censor versus what they choose to promote.
The double standard is glaring. Riker notes that a tech platform will instantaneously ban a conservative political voice or a biologist for stating basic facts about human chromosomes, claiming the user violates their pristine community trust and safety guidelines.
Right, instant ban.
But that exact same platform will allow the systematic digital exploitation, financial extortion, and psychological ruin of millions of young men to operate with total impunity 247.
Why? Because it's so lucrative.
Because it is the most profitable business model on Earth. And what's worse, they are legally protected by the government while doing it. Riker highlights Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996.
Okay, remind us what Section 230 is, because it's mentioned a lot in the news, but the history is really important here.
In 1996, the internet was in its infancy. Section 230 was written to protect early internet message boards. The idea was simple. If a random user posts something illegal or defamatory on your message board, you, the website owner, can't be sued for it because you are just the neutral platform, not the publisher.
Which made sense in 1996 for a text-based chat room.
It made perfect sense. But today, Riker argues, Section 230 has mutated into a state-sponsored legal shield for billionaires.
They hide behind it.
It allows modern tech oligarchs to build highly manipulative algorithms that intentionally isolate and exploit men. They build a digital brothel, they run the algorithm, they take a massive 20% cut of every transaction on platforms like OnlyFans, and yet, thanks to Section 230, they face absolutely zero legal liability for the psychological destruction, the addiction, or the financial ruin they actively engineer.
It is a devastatingly bleak picture he paints. You have a rigged family court system, entirely captured universities, eradicated physical brotherhoods, stagnant gig economy wages, and predatory digital plantations designed to bleed you dry in the middle of the night.
It's overwhelming.
So the ultimate question the book has to answer is, how does a man fight back? How do you exist in this matrix? This brings us to Section 7, economic insurgency and the patriarchal imperative. What is Riker's ultimate call to action?
Riker's conclusion is stark but clear. He states definitively that you cannot change this system from within. You cannot vote your way out of it.
The political system won't save you.
No politician, right or left, is coming to save you because the uniparty relies on the current structure. The system is operating exactly as designed. Therefore, his blueprint for survival is what he calls economic insurgency. And the very first step of that insurgency is opting out of the matrix.
Meaning what, in practical, everyday terms?
Practically, it means aggressively and systematically rejecting the subscription-based lifestyle that is pushed by the corporate elites and the World Economic Forum. The infamous idea that you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Right.
Riker urges men to stop renting their lives. He tells them to aggressively acquire physical assets, no matter how small. Buy land, buy physical tools, buy firearms, own your own vehicle outright. Stop subscribing to software and start owning hardware.
He also places a massive emphasis on using physical cash. Why is cash so critical to this insurgency?
Because the digital economy is a surveillance apparatus. He points out that every single time you use a digital payment network like PayPal, Venmo, Stripe, or Apple Pay, you are inviting a woke billionaire into your wallet.
You're leaving a footprint.
You are generating a data trail that can and will be used against you.
He brings up some recent history to prove this point, showing how these payment networks enforce political biases.
Yes. He cites the Canadian Freedom Convoy protests, where the government and private platforms like GoFundMe and banking apps literally seized millions of dollars in donations and froze the betted accounts of working class truckers who were protesting peacefully.
That really happened.
He also mentions PayPal's leaked policy attempt to fine their own users $2,500 directly out of their accounts for spreading what the company subjectively defined as misinformation.
So if you step out of line politically, they don't just ban your Twitter account, they turn off your ability to buy groceries.
Exactly. Which is why Riker argues that using physical cash whenever possible is an act of defiance. It starves these woke networks of transaction fees and data, and it protects your ultimate privacy and autonomy.
He also extends this boycott to the gig economy itself. He says to completely starve the apps. Don't drive for them, don't deliver for them, and stop ordering your food through them. Go pick up the pizza yourself.
Cut the cord entirely.
And what is his advice regarding education? If universities are hostile re-education camps, what is a young man supposed to do?
His advice is radical. Abandon the traditional university system entirely. Stop taking on massive, non-dischargeable federal debt to sit in a classroom where you are despised.
Where do they go instead?
He advises men to pivot entirely toward independent trade schools, heavy equipment apprenticeships, plumbing, electrical work, and rigorous physical entrepreneurial ventures. Learn to fix things in the physical world because the digital world is rigged against you.
He calls this reclaiming the biological imperative.
Yes, the return to raw, unyielding physical strength and competence, that is Riker's ultimate currency.
He writes that a physically capable man, a man hardened by lifting iron, trained in martial arts, and capable of fixing his own engine, is functionally immune to progressive bullying.
Exactly.
The HR department can't fire a self-employed plumber.
That's exactly it. He points to the explosive grassroots growth of private, men-only MMA and jiu-jitsu gyms across the country. He views these not just as places to work out, but as the new tribal sanctuaries. They are the modern replacements for the Masonic lodges and the union halls that were destroyed.
But won't the activists just target those gyms using the exact same Title VII public accommodation laws that destroyed the Boy Scouts?
Yeah.
If they are men only, won't they just be sued out of existence?
Riker anticipates this, and he brings up a really fascinating, aggressive legal tactic for these new parallel networks.
What's the loophole?
To protect these new spaces from infiltration, he advises organizers to legally structure them as private religious, philosophical, or expressive associations.
Utilizing the First Amendment.
Exactly. Heavily leveraging First Amendment protections of freedom of association. If you structure it as a private club with a defined ethos rather than a public business, you build a legal fortress around the brotherhood.
So, synthesizing Riker's ultimate overarching message. The current societal system relies entirely on men playing by rigged, superficially egalitarian rules, rules designed specifically to guarantee their failure. The only way out of this trap is to completely reject the framing of the oppressors and embrace what he calls the patriarchal imperative.
The absolute unapologetic necessity for men to violently reassert their dominance as protectors, builders, and providers.
Right.
Refuse to apologize for biological reality, stop seeking validation from a culture that hates you, and take back your throne in the physical world.
It is a massive, sweeping, deeply polarizing thesis. It takes the fragmented anxieties of the modern man and connects them into a terrifyingly coherent blueprint. But it leaves us with a fascinating, provocative thought that Riker doesn't explicitly resolve in the text, but which hangs over the entire argument like a storm cloud.
I know exactly what you're referring to.
What's the million-dollar question?
If Riker is right in his diagnosis, if the entire global digital plantation, from the multi-billion-dollar valuations of gig economy apps to the massive simp economy of OnlyFans and Twitch, relies fundamentally on the blind compliance, the cheap labor, and the extracted financial input of the isolated, depressed, working-class male, what actually happens to the global tech economy if his call to action works?
Right. What if they wake up?
Exactly. What if even 10%, just 1 in 10 of working class men read this book, follow Riker's advice, permanently unplug from the algorithm, reject the subscription model, delete the dating apps, and begin building their own local cash-based shadow economies.
That is the ultimate systemic threat. Does the digital empire collapse under the weight of its own lost revenue? Do these tech monopolies crumble when their primary battery source unplugs?
Or conversely, does the system panic and become even more authoritarian to force compliance?
Right. Do they mandate digital currencies to ban cash? If they lose their prime consumers and their cheapest labor force, how does the empire strike back?
It's an incredible scenario to game out, and it's something for you, the listener, to mull over as you look at your own digital habits. The entire math of modern misery requires your active participation. What happens to the machine when the gears simply decide to walk away?
It's a thought that definitely lingers long after you close the book.
Ugh.
Listen, to understand the full depth of this history, to see the exact economic data he uses to construct this matrix, and to arm yourselves with these insights, you need to read the raw source material for yourself. Do not just take our word for it.
You really have to read it.
You can buy Macroaggressions. How Big Tech Billionaires Profit from Male Misery by Conrad Riker, available right now on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It is a highly recommended read for anyone trying to decipher the modern landscape. And you should definitely follow the author for more unvarnished truth and ongoing cultural analysis at Conrad Riker on Substack.
Before we go, please remember to like and subscribe to this deep dive. It costs you nothing, but it is massive for us. It supports the show, pushes back against algorithmic suppression, and keeps these critical conversations flowing.
It really does.
We started this hour talking about how murky the diagnostic landscape of our culture is, how the X-ray machine is broken. Well, whether you agree with his conclusions or vehemently despise them, Riker has definitely provided a completely new, hyper-detailed set of blueprints for the machine. It's up to you to decide what to build with them. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.